Okay, so why don't we do a quick check-in and see how everybody's doing?
Well, I'm doing great because I'm with my two favorite Saturday morning brunch people right now.
I
You
had
know,
a really good morning as well. I was doing some yoga. My boyfriend has a what do you call this thing? Rebounder. You just bounce on it, so it really pumps you up. And I did a little bit of a workout, so it's just a really great way to start a Saturday morning.
Does he do it every day? Does he do it
Yeah,
every day?
yeah, he does do it every day. If you've been to a Tony Robbins event, this is something they really talk a lot about. Starting their day with a workout, and they recommend the rebounder specifically. It's easy on the joint and the knees, and it
Mhm.
gives you great energy. And I love
so Asil, when you met him, was he on the rebounder?
it. That's a good one. I made sure he's not.
Yeah, no, it reminds me of I went to a Fiji when I went to Fiji for a Tony Robbins event. Everybody was on the rebound because we had such long hours. So just to keep fresh and keep your mind on, uh, it works. I remember going for 4 or 5 days in a row with no food and very little energy and still being able to focus, all because of the rebounder. We had this cleanse, this diet that we did. It was the body cleanse, so there was no food. It was all liquids for 4 days. So
Wow.
yeah, it's great, and I'm feeling great as well. I nothing like a brunch for the mind with my two good friends here.
And we have people joining us. Thank you, everybody, for those joining us on Zoom and on Facebook. I'm not sure if it's live yet, but regardless, that's great.
So, what are we going to be talking about today, Omar?
So we're going to talk a little bit about the real estate market, and I think it's a really cool topic to talk about. It seems to be everywhere. Everywhere I go to a coffee shop, people are talking about real estate. I'm, walking in the park, people are talking about real estate. I bought this house for this much. I put an offer yesterday. My property went up $100,000 in 3 years. These are the kind of things you hear everywhere, and I think it's cool to have this chat about it because our country and our real estate market in Toronto is one of the best in the world. It's ranked one of the top three in 195 countries, so that's a big thing, right? It's it's actually world class, and we're lucky to be in this country. Part of the reasons why our country or our real estate market is so good is because the ability to leverage and the potential. There's a lot of immigration people coming in with a lot of money, uh, spending primarily on housing in order to get their life set up, and then also, there's Canada has and even Toronto has a great potential to continue to grow with all the excess land. So it's a great place to be in, and I think we should all be taking advantage of it. What are your thoughts about what do you tell your clients about real estate, Brian?
Uh, Honestly, real estate is how I built my wealth up and was able to retire from my corporate job at 37 years old instead of 65. It's something I continue to invest in. I'm always talking with people about it. And I completely agree with everything you said. In fact, I've had a lot of people ask me over the last couple of years because of what's in the news about like, oh, well, real estate's so expensive and the Toronto, you can't afford anything anymore. And look at how much the prices have gone up in Toronto and Vancouver. But then, interestingly enough, if you compare that to world prices, right? If you take other big metropolitan cities around the world and compare their prices, like the New Yorks, the LAs, the Tokyos, the Londons, the Paris, places like that, you find out that Canadian real estate is still, relatively speaking, very inexpensive or affordable. And that's exactly why you see so many foreigners coming over to invest here because they still see it as a deal compared to the rest of the world. So I'm not downplaying that people here are having a problem being able to afford real estate, but relatively speaking, as an investment for the people who still have money to invest, it is a great investment. And lately, I've been having conversations with people about like, well, what should we do now? And we all agree that there are opportunities coming. If we do see a price decrease over the next few months, that just means that it's going to be more affordable and easier to get in and get investments in the coming weeks and months as opportunities present themselves. So I'm excited about the topic of real estate right now, and that's why I'm super glad we're talking about it.
I agree. And back in the days when I used to work in the bank, one of the main financial goals people wanted to plan for is buying real estate, whether it's their first home or investment property. It was almost like it almost was the center of every conversation. And aside from kids' education and retirement, real estate was, the top three goals people often wanted to talk about. So I know it's a big topic. It's something that often consumes a lot of people, and I'm excited that we're talking about it as well, especially because we are dealing with unprecedented times, and it's interesting to see the influence. I'm not sure what that is, but it's not a kid screaming in the back. so at least I'm relieved. Anyways, it's all gone now. Back to you, Omar.
Yeah. No, as Brian had mentioned, people talk about our markets being expensive, and they're not in perspective. When you think about this being a world-class city, we're still cheaper than a lot of major countries, major cities and markets out there. Even first-time buyers, they seem to feel like the market is very difficult to get into, and that the foreign investors are building up the prices with their investments in Canada. But we have with programs where people are able to go in with 5%, and some programs, if it's a first-time buyer, they're able to go in and have the 5%, the 5% that they're putting in also funded back to them. So they're practically going in with 0% down. So there are incentives and programs. The government puts in a lot of incentives for first-time buyers, giving them a rebate for their first time, for the land transfer tax, using their RSP money. There's a ton of incentives there for them. And in perspective, if you compare a first time buyer versus a foreign investor, somebody who's buying a property of $500,000, a first time buyer would need to be putting in around 25K, versus a foreign investor would have to be putting in around 175,000, which is 35% of the value. You can see the perspective there. So we do have a great opportunity to all put our money in. A lot of times people are afraid, thinking that it's too hard to get into the market. It's a lot easier than you think once you take a step forward and you talk to the right people and you get the proper kind of guidance. There's tons of available incentives and options there that can make this very possible. And the best part is, even if we're talking about insured mortgages, which is having an insurance from CMHC, Canadian Housing Market Corporation, even if we get an insured mortgage, which means that you need to put 20% down. If you look at the numbers, our 15-year trend line has shown us that the markets are increasing at an average of around 5 to 6%. And if you look at the numbers, you're putting down 20% on the price of the property, and it's increasing 5 to 6% year over year. It's around 30% return of investment, which is unheard of. And plus, with all of that, you're also sheltering the tax on it because it's your principal residence. So it's definitely an amazing vehicle for people to grow wealth, and for people who are thinking about living a lifestyle that they can have their flexibility of their time and a great overall life. They need to rely on real estate as one of their vehicles. So, Brian, what do you think about that?
I completely agree with everything you said, and I find the big conversation that I often get with people is they'll say, "Well, I spoke with my bank, and they said investing in real estate is risky, and you're only on average you're only going to make 3 to 5%, whereas in stocks you can make 6 to 9% or even 10%. It's a no-brainer," and they always love to show those statistics, but it's not even an apples to apples comparison, because they're completely leaving out the leverage of I only have 20% down and the bank is paying for 80% like that. And here's the example I always give. The next time your bank is open, go to your bank and walk in the door with $100,000 and say, hey, Mr. Banker, I'd like to take this $100,000 and get some money from you and put it into the stock market. How much will you give me? And the bank manager will laugh and say, nothing. Take your $100,000 and go put it in the stock market, and you're going to get $100,000 worth of stocks. But if I walk into my same bank and I say, hey, Mr. Banker, I've got $100,000. I'd like to buy some a rental property or an investment property. How much money would you give me? The bank will sit you down and ask you some questions and make sure you qualify, and then give you $400,000 to add to your 100 to go and invest in real estate. So which do they really think is the more risky investment? They're willing to fund you, 4 times as much as you have to go out and invest in real estate, but they won't give you anything to invest in stocks unless you're already a seasoned investor and you've got, $1 million and you've been with them for 20 years. So that says to me right there, which the banks think is the more, the bigger risk in terms of loaning the money, right? It's a no-brainer to me.
So what do you, from the experience you have with clients who are interested in real estate, what have you been seeing the biggest challenge is? Because most people want to be in real estate and understand that it's a relatively safer investment than stocks or other options. But what do you feel is the biggest challenge for people?
So I've noticed that the people tend to come into the market with a predisposed ideology that they need to buy what they want to get into right away. And in some cases, especially when somebody's starting off with no property, right? If somebody's a first-time buyer, it's hard to get into a $800,000 condo or a $700,000 condo. So the psychology in Canada, it's a transitional, it's a growing process of you getting into your first and then growing with the wave. You need to at that point you're floating on the market. So as the market goes up, your value is starting to go up with it. And you're only really starting to make money when you start investing on a second property, because now you have both of them growing at the same time. So the hardest part in people is they seem to think that I want to get to where I want to get, and I want to get to it now, right? And it's a process. The biggest thing is with lending is sometimes people feel like they can't qualify with their incomes because of the price of the properties. So you need to be transitioning from one stage to another. And the earlier you get in, the faster you're taking advantage of the market, and the cheaper it is for you to get into the property or to get into the market.
I always tell people, like sometimes you reject yourself first before offering. So when you don't go and ask about, for example, how much you can be pre-approved for, because of the assumption that you're not ready or your income's too low or whatever, you're rejecting yourself first before you're giving the bank the opportunity to reject you. And that's the interesting thing, because a lot of people don't take action because of that.
That's right. And there are many options in financing. You can always get your loan from an A lender, but you can also find alternative lendings where you can get into a B lender, which is generally more flexible, right, than an A lender. And you never really know until you actually get in there and start with the process. I've met with a lot of clients who, really never thought that they'd be able to get into their first homes, and then with a call with a mortgage broker, within a couple of weeks they already had put an offer on the property. And it's people want to get into a property. Everybody wants to buy real estate, but sometimes they end up rejecting their own self. Sorry, Brian, you were about to say something.
Oh, no problem. I was going to say that I used to belong to a couple of different groups where we were getting educated about investing in real estate. And after I'd been with the group for a while, I found out that like 80% of the group, and this was a group that was across Canada, it met in most of the cities in Canada, 80% of the members in this group never ever pulled the trigger and never ever got a property. But they were paying like $200 a month to be part of this group and go to all these, twice a year we'd have this big weekend thing, and it was learning all about how to invest in real estate and look after property. And I was blown away that these people would be paying to be a part of this group and show up to these meetings every month, but they never actually took action. And honestly, that was one of the things that motivated me to become a coach and you know, help people work through it. But like, Omar, do you have a process, or what do you think is a process for people to move them from that thinking about it and talking about it to actually taking some action and, you know, calling that mortgage broker, putting in that offer? What do you think are the steps that people should go through?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it is psychology. It's belief that they can. It's desire that they want to. It's, first of all, knowing where you're at. You need to know where you're starting. What's your starting point? Some people want to get into their first homes. Some people have already purchased a condo. Now they want to buy a house so that they can, you know, grow into with their families. Some people are looking, they're in a house and they want to buy a second condo, use as an investment, or whatever the case. And you need to know where you're starting. You need to understand. Anytime you want to get to a destination, you need to be able to measure how far you are from that goal, right? And that starts with a starting point. So understanding your liabilities, understanding, and sometimes people start in different stages. Some people are starting with high debts. Some people have, you know, school loans coming into the market. Some people are, you know, they have a gift from a parent that allows them to access their options much easily. So it doesn't matter where you start. What's important is that where you're heading. I think that's the big thing, is we can all move forward. It doesn't matter where you start, as long as you start to quantify where you're standing and understand where you want to go. So the process is to just kind of sit down and, first of all, understand the wants and the needs, and then know what the liabilities are. You know, what kind of safety margins are they taking into consideration that they'd like to have, a comfort zone, how much of a down payment they have to put into the property, how much do they need to get in the loan from the bank. So having that first conversation with the right professionals, with a financial planner, with a mortgage broker. So that's these are generally the steps that I take at the beginning. And I think a big part of it is the psychology, Brian. It's a huge part in how you proceed with any life, and especially when you have a blockage and move forward with buying a property. So what do you think is something that you would tell people about their psychology when they're looking into buying a property? You're muted.
All right. One of the things I like to talk to people about is a concept called your frame of reference. And that is, for example, let's talk about the recent things that are happening in the market, because people have a very short-term memory. And what happens is when you think about the recent volatilities that are experiencing, they tend to focus so much on that frame. So I'm actually going to share something here with you. Let me share my screen quickly. So if I show you like the S&P 500 in the last 6 months or recently, and you're going to look at it from that perspective, you're going to think it's just the end of the world in a way. Like, oh my God, what's happening? We just lost so much. This is like the worst decline in so many years. And the frame of reference is so narrowed on a specific time frame. But if you look at it from a 10-year period, then all of a sudden it looks like a hiccup along the way. I actually have it here. It looks like a hiccup along the way versus something like that where it looks like the end of the world in a way. And sometimes this also applies to our lives in general. Like when we're building our goals and we're building our future things that we're looking to achieve, it's important to widen the frame of reference and not just look at a narrowed few months or a few weeks scenario, but look at the bigger picture. So it's not about what's your life in the next few months like. Real estate is a long-term thing. And therefore, it's really important to broaden the perspective and help people identify what their future self looks like, and therefore support their journey along the way by giving them that perspective.
That's very true. That's very true. I guess we talked a little bit about, you know, where you're starting and understanding where you're standing, the right kind of psychology that you need to adopt, and now the big thing is going to be, where do you set your target? What's your goal, right? And I think I'm a personally, with anything that I do, I'm a big dreamer. I like to dream big. That's what motivates me. It gets me to push through hard times. If there's something that's standing in my way, I can get through it because I have a big vision, right? So it's okay to dream big, but whereas people tend to self-sabotage themselves, where they start to think that I need to get to where my goal is right now, right? And that's not being very reasonable. And that's basically, you're self-sabotaging yourself. You're putting a lot of stress on yourself. And I think the right thing the right kind of mindset is to have a big enticing dream, a good vision. And there's a saying that I love. They say most people overestimate what they can achieve in a year, and they underestimate what they can achieve in a decade. And it's very true, right? So if you also start to space out your goals, that doesn't mean that you do not take action. Take action on what you can do now, right? But it's a progressive plan that you need to build up to and you need to get to. So that's a big thing that I tell my clients is let's start with a reasonable goal for now. We're walking towards a bigger vision, but let's start taking action today so that we're not missing opportunities and missing time. And at the same time, it's important to not self-sabotage yourself, take on too much, because you start to slow yourself down, and you start to slow down with failure as well. And I think that can disable you psychologically. Go ahead.
I have something to add to that, actually. So when I support clients and figure out their financial goals, or sometimes life goals in general, because financial goals are intertwined with other things you want to be able to achieve in your life, lifestyle goals, relationships, families, etc. So the interesting thing is, I find that sometimes people procrastinate taking action for different reasons. And the two ones that jump at me the most is either they don't believe they're able to achieve that goal. So even though they're extremely excited about the goal itself, there's a voice internally that's critical, that's telling them, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, this is not something I'm capable of doing. So they're scared and fearful of failure. And that's why they procrastinate taking action. Not because the goal itself is not something they want, but because they a part of them believes it's not possible. So that requires certain work on strengthening the belief system and the self-worth that supports the fulfillment of this goal in your life. The other one that jumps at me is that this goal was never theirs to begin with. They inherited it from some sort of social pressure. Maybe it's their parents' goal, maybe it's their friend's goal, maybe it's just what everybody is talking about, and therefore they think they should have it. But a part of them is never taking action because it's not really their goal. So I recall, I'll give you another example. There is this exam that I continuously, my LSATs, back when I wanted to be a lawyer. I postponed the LSATs like a good 3 times. I was preparing for it. I was ready for it. I eventually wrote it, but I'm like, why did I just keep postponing this LSATs thing? And it's because part of me just never wanted to become a lawyer. And it's important when we're talking about goals with clients to help them identify what's their goal and to strengthen the belief system that supports the fulfillment of that goal so that the action becomes something they're able to do. Because the action is the last part.
And Brian, I know that you're a visionary as well, and you like to you guide a lot of people, you coach a lot of people with how to progress. Do you guys talk about goals, and what do you have to say to your clients?
Absolutely, Omar. And exactly what you were describing is the process that I do with everybody I talk to and my clients. I take it further with them. So the very first thing that I ever do with someone that I talk to is what I call a success snapshot. And that's exactly what you were discussing. It's a where are we today, right? What's our financial position or situation? So I have a bunch of questions that I ask people. And that's a call I do with anyone, because if I can help them get clarity around where are they today? And 9 times out of 10, people leave that call feeling so much better because they actually had this emotional perspective of where they thought they were financially, but they had no numbers or no data to actually back that up. And normally they're acting from a more negative place because of those emotions that Asil is talking about. They feel bad, they feel guilty, they feel ashamed, I should be better than I thought I was, whatever. So that's always a starting point. But then the next thing, when people become a client, the first exercise I give them is, okay, I want to know what your 1 year, your 5-year and your 10-year goals are. Exactly what you were talking about. Most people will overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10 years. And I want to get them clear on what those goals are. Now they have to be specific. Asil's absolutely right. If you're dealing with somebody else's goal or you don't believe it, it's never going to happen. But another thing I find is if people aren't emotionally in touch with that goal, then it's also never going to happen. And it has to be specific. So the one you hear about all the time on, you know, for New Year's resolutions is people say, oh, this year I'm going to lose weight. And it's like, great. What does that mean? You know, are you carrying around bags of sand in your pocket? Or how are you going to lose weight? How much weight are you going to lose? Okay, I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay, great. Now we have a target, something to actually shoot for. But by when do you want to lose that? Is that a year from now, a month from now, 10 years from now? And you have to get very specific on those goals. And there's lots of stuff out in the internet about this. But I learned this from my mentors about having a 1-year goals, 5-year goals, and 10-year goals, because then I can start to create a plan from that, right? I can make things achievable. Well, what do I think I could actually achieve in 1 year? If it seems far-fetched, like if I want to have 10 rental properties, that's probably not going to happen in 1 year, but it could happen in 10 years, maybe even in 5 years. So now I've got these different time frames to spread that out towards, and then we can work backwards and start creating a plan on what do you need to do this week, the next month, the next 6 months, so that I can achieve the 1-year goals. That sets me up to achieve the 5-year goals, which sets me up to achieve my 10-year goals, and I can continue to progress, right? I mean, I used to, what I used to do before this, I was around a lot of project managers, and that's what I realized in the business world. If you don't have a project, if there's not milestones, if somebody's not tracking this and keeping people accountable, then it usually doesn't get done. All those internal projects that nobody's tracking, they just disappear. But the ones where we've got a plan, we've got goals, and people are emotionally invested in achieving those goals, those are the things that actually get done. So that's what anything to do with finances and wealth, and if it's investing in real estate or whatever, turn it into a plan that fits with your goals. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention is nobody actually wants to own 10 properties. Okay, that's not actually the goal. That's the way to achieve your goal, which could be financial freedom or a different lifestyle or having the freedom to travel because I've got passive income. So that's another thing I help people do is they'll usually say to me, well, I want to get a rental property. And I'll be like, why? What will having a rental property allow you to do that you can't do now? Oh, well, I want to start to replace some of my income so I can take Mondays off. Beautiful. Now we know what the goal is. You want to take Mondays off, and getting a rental property is one of the ways that you can make that happen. And I find that's when it starts to light people up, is when I help them get directed to the actual thing they want to achieve. Because money is just a vehicle. Having a trunk full of money doesn't do anything for you. It's what you can do with that extra money. That's when it starts to get exciting.
That's very true.
Point. Omar, how do you help individuals after they clarify that destination for them? How do you help them build a roadmap?
So yeah, building a roadmap is very, very important, and you have to quantify it clearly. It has to be clear for you to be able to know how to get, you know, that this is what my ultimate goal is to do, and then look at all the different options in order to get to this goal. I mean, allow yourself to be flexible with the different options that are available for you and to take action on them, and then finally to celebrate. But in that process, we go through a lot of, there's in our real estate process, we have multiple specialists in the team, and each specialist will bring something to the picture. And to get to that roadmap, first of all, you need to clear, I mean, as you were talking about it before, you need to clear anything that's psychologically holding you back. The thing that I'd like to tell my clients is the story of this baby elephant tied to a rope. And this baby elephant is tied to this rope, and he can't leave the rope, the vicinity of the rope. But this baby elephant ends up growing up and becomes huge, and is still tied to this small rope with this little stick. And you ask yourself, when you go and you see these elephants, you're like, why don't these elephants just like push through and just leave? It's because psychologically they've been trained that they're stuck in their minds thinking that they cannot push through because they've had multiple failed attempts in the past. So it's the same with people. People come in with many failed attempts, and they start to think that they cannot do something. So first part is to really create an enticing vision, and then breaking it down into steps, and anticipating that step ahead so that you can be comfortable moving forward, and going through the process and celebrating at the end and feeling great about what you're doing, celebrating every moment. I've had a experience with one of our clients, and it felt like they were stuck. We started with the process. We were looking for a property. We defined the property. We defined the area. We talked about the criteria, and we started to go look for properties. And every time we would go see a property, there was multiple offers, and they would fail. They started to get discouraged. And I realized at that point that we were not really celebrating every step of the way. So we were like, you know what? Let's go out and have dinner together. Let's go and celebrate where we're at today. And then, you know, in the most miraculous of ways, after we celebrated, after we got out this negative emotions, the next day, then when we went to see a property, we found the right one, and we were able to make it happen. So your morale is very important as well when you're looking at a property, and feeling great about what you're doing is also very important.
I can definitely attest to that, not just from a investment perspective, in life in general. When we're starting to experience resistance, if we continue in this action mode and we just want to push through the resistance, the more we realize this resistance grows. Like the challenges we're dealing with just grow and grow and grow because we're literally pushing through them. Versus when we just let things be, the resistance dissolves and we open possibilities that we probably didn't even see before. So when you're working and you realize you're at the point where you're fatigued, for example, you should go rest, not potentially work through this fatigue. And that's what happens when you are constantly looking at investments. You have a brain fatigue when you are overwhelmed with all these different challenges that are coming your way. You're continuously building that block, and you're not seeing the other potential opportunities that are also part of that process, but you currently have a block right now that prevents you to see them.
That's right. I think another big piece, I'm just kind of going through it in my head, is being flexible. I can't count the amount of times that I started off with a client and they're like, this is what I want and let's go get it. And then after a few questions back and forth, after a couple of suggestions here and there, they're like, no, actually, you know what? I like this idea more. I like this idea more. And I'm like, well, this is closer to your budget, and we can make that happen. So having a specialist, having somebody that you can talk to that can give you a good idea of all your options is also very important for you to set a good vision and for you to be able to succeed in achieving what you want.
So I have a question on that actually, and either of you can answer it. So let's say my budget is limited right now, but my vision or what I'd like my first home to be is more about living in a specific home rather than it is investing. So if somebody comes to you with that dilemma, like should I have a starting point that can get me somewhat of a decent property, but would I rather maybe work harder for an additional year or two to get my dream property, or should I just settle with what I have right now so I can participate in the market? How do you help people navigate this option or this dilemma in a way? It's more like a short-term gain or like get what you can today, or just hang on and get what you really want tomorrow.
If the feeling that you're going to go into this property is I'm settling, then it's probably not a good idea. But that's what I'm talking about, psychological shift, is if your vision is not, if you understand that this is a transition to get to where you want to get, this is financially the best thing you could do, because you're taking advantage of the market in that period of time. And if your vision is clear, I know that I want to get here in 5 years, but today I need this in order to get there, then it's a continuous, level of motivation. Your motivation does not stop when you move into the property because it's only a stepping stone for the next property, right? So I don't think settling is the right word. And if a client feels that they're settling, they shouldn't do it. They need to be in a space where they feel they need to celebrate the success that they've had. They need to feel great about it. They need to anticipate what's next. And that's why when we sit down with our clients, just like you, Brian, we take a vested interest in wanting to know their 10-year goal. And we follow up with them, right? So we buy their property, the relationship continues. We're like, okay, well, we've done this. Now 2 years down the line, we said that we were going to achieve this much. So it's this relationship that continues.
Yeah, your audio is going funny. Can you repeat the last thing you said?
Yeah, I said that we follow up. Let's assume that part of the plan was to follow up in 2 years. And we follow up with the client in 2 years. We say, this was originally the goal. We were supposed to be here. Where are you at? And then we keep them accountable. And we get them, we constantly push them and nudge them to their goal. I think a very big thing that you can talk about, Brian, as well, I think is in order to feel good about anything you need to do, you need to be educated about it. You need to read resources. You need to attend different seminars, speak to the right people. So can you tell us a little bit about that? And also, how do you create a map for your clients as well?
So this is where it starts to get really exciting for me, and I love your question, Asil, because what I find is most people, like you guys have talked about, they come with a set of expectations. They come with I should be doing this, right? And they've got this set of ideas about things, but often it's because they've never been exposed to what are the alternatives out there, the other ways of looking at things. So your question, Asil, specifically reminds me of like somebody who has an ownership, like I want to own a home kind of a mentality versus an investor's mentality, right? And as an investor, I can tell you that, when I started investing in Calgary 16 years ago, I lived for 3 years in my rental properties that I was buying. So I bought the first one and I lived upstairs and I had tenants down. And then after a year, I moved into my next one that I purchased and I lived on one side with the tenant below and I had a tenant on the other side. And then eventually I moved to the other side so I could have the whole up and the down. Were those my dream houses? No, they weren't. Now, I was comfortable. I wasn't miserable and unhappy, and I didn't feel like I was settling. However, I was very clear that I was on a path so that I could just have stayed in my nice condo that I was living in. It was beautiful. It was in a great area, and I could have had a good life. But I wanted a great life. I wanted my life. I wanted freedom. And I was very clear on that goal, going back to what Omar said, helping clients get very clear on, well, what are their real goals and where might they just be, well, this seems easier. This is, I know I can do this, right? But motivating them of what else becomes possible and into that real abundance kind of mindset. Are you guys familiar with the Marshmallow Experiment? Have you ever heard of this?
Yeah, it's very famous. Talk about it.
Really quickly, like 30 years ago, this guy did a test. He took little kids, like 4 and 5 year olds, and he put them in a room with an adult that they knew. And the adult said to them, I have to leave the room. Here's a marshmallow. You can eat this if you want, but if you can wait until I come back, you'll get 2 marshmallows instead of just the 1 marshmallow. And then they would leave and they had cameras watching the kids. And of course, if they've redone this experiment. If you want to have a good laugh, go on Google and Google the Marshmallow Experiment and just watch these kids because it's hilarious. Some of them are like licking the marshmallow or hiding their eyes or going under the table because they're trying to keep themselves from eating. Okay. And the moral of this story is they followed up on these kids over the next 30 years. And what they found was the kids who really had no problem waiting for the second marshmallow, that was the biggest determiner of future success, was the ability to not give in to instant gratification. Okay, and that's what's going on a lot of times with people where it's like, well, I just want my new house right now versus getting an investment property. Because what kind of a dream house would you be able to buy if you had 10 investment properties and had $100,000 of passive income coming into every year? Then what starts to become possible? versus, oh, I'm just going to get my dream house now. I'm not going to bother doing any of these other sorts of things. And you're actually settling, I think, in that particular case, into a life that you believe is within your reach right now at this particular moment, versus something you could create if you're willing to go on this journey, if you're willing to, take some steps, and as you said, Omar, be flexible and not be attached to that. And going back, connecting it to what you said, Asil, oftentimes we, these goals we think we have are goals that we got from someone else, from our parents, from the media, from whatever, right? What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to go to school, get a good job, get a house, have a family, and then I'm supposed to sit and watch Dancing with the Stars for the next 20 years and just sustain that life, right? And for some people, that I'm not judging that or saying that that's wrong, but for the people that it doesn't feel like enough, there are other options out there if you're willing to not eat the first marshmallow and wait and get the future marshmallows.
No, that's greatly said, Brian. I remembered a very funny story actually, and it kind of fits in very nicely to what you're saying. It's when I got my license, one of the major, that was around 12 years now. I remember I used to read a lot about different very successful people and how they acquired, wealth and success, and it was always had real estate in the cornerstone. And I remember sitting there with an Excel spreadsheet. I'm a mechanical engineer background, right? So I remember sitting there with an Excel spreadsheet and trying to create this kind of a virtual reality of how it would play out. And I put in the numbers and I said, okay, so first property, this price, this much rate of increase every year. And then second property, I'm going to refinance my first property, pull out some equity, buy my second property, and then both of them, and in 2-3 years, I'm going to be refinancing both these properties and buying another 2 properties. And I went through the spreadsheet and I pulled it down like through 15 years. And I looked at the number and my jaw dropped. And I was like, wow, I can do this. And that's the opportunity that you get with real estate is investment could be your vehicle to get you to the lifestyle that you want, right? You can't expect to get the lifestyle you want today, right? You need to work to get there, right? And if you did get it today by some reason, like by some miracle, if you were able to go to somebody and they financed you this money, what are you going to do? You're going to be stressed out of your head. How are you going to be able to sustain it? How are you going to be able to afford it? So having a strategy and having a step-by-step process, and we can help you build that strategy in this call. There's, either one of us is able to give you a lot of perspective in that, and being motivated by the end goal. So it goes perfectly to what you said, Steele. You should never be motivated by buying a property today because there should be a bigger goal behind after it. You know what I mean? So being motivated to continue to move forward, and that's how I got into real estate. I looked at the spreadsheet and I'm thinking to myself, this exponential growth of income and of worth, of net worth. Where can I find that other than here, right? So, and I went all in. That was one of the big reasons why I jumped into real estate that I did.
I love stories like that, and that I'm lucky I get to hear those types of stories all the time, and then help people create those stories. But I think about the same thing. When I got into real estate, it was 4 years later that I was able to retire from the corporate world, and I've never gone back. And I say at this point, I would go live in the woods with my dog before I would go back to a corporate job. Like, I'm just so much happier with this lifestyle, working from home, having my own business, being free. And then the other thing is, because of investing, and I'm so clear of this, and I feel so blessed and grateful, when this crisis hit, and I saw, first of all, people were dealing with health, like we talked about last week, but then there were so many people that were in a financial crisis and scrambling and applying for government programs. But because of the investment that I've done, because of the world that I've created for myself, I just quickly looked over here at my finances and my cash flow, and I went, I'm totally, like, I could go on like this for the next year and I'd be fine with no money coming in from my business, if that was the case. And that's what freedom, everybody talks about this financial freedom, but it's this emotional freedom and freedom from stress of, by creating this other thing over here through investing and leverage and real estate being a huge part of it, I can relax, I can be stress-free, and then I can focus on, well, how can I help other people by doing stuff like this, right? How can I now help other people and bring them up so that they can start to do that? And Asil and I, we talked about this before. We're creating a community of financial freedom fighters, people who want to also be free, because then we can help other people as well, right? And that's why I love doing these calls with you guys.
I totally feel the same, because I guess the foundational thing of what we're trying to say is when you attach your goals to an emotional need that truly motivates you, then you're going to find ways to create that, because you're driven by the right reasons versus extrinsic things. You're internalizing why this is important. And that's really where our passions are. That we're always looking for meaning and purpose behind everything we do. So whenever we're achieving things that lack meaning or purpose, our fulfillment is short-lived and it's superficial. But the second we're able to find the intrinsic value behind the goals we're achieving, they become part of our journey on several levels, the financial just being one, but it ties into the philosophy of our lives, the meaning behind them. And that's really where the biggest growth is. And there's actually a saying about that is, when you're on your road to achieve your goals, it's more exciting to see who you become as a result of achieving these goals beyond just achieving the goal itself. It's really an expansion of yourself, because your goals will grow to the extent that you do in a way. So it's impossible to be pursuing financial goals and real estate goals and any goals you have in mind without expanding yourself and your skills and becoming just a person that adopts a growth mindset along the way. And that's the beauty about this journey. It's you think you're pursuing something external and you realize you're becoming a better person as a result of it.
I was going to say, when you were talking about purpose, that's why brunch is never as good as brunch with purpose, right?
That's right. That's where this name came from. Omar was the mastermind behind that name, but it's true. I mean, our conversations are always very purposeful, intentional. They're very supportive to our journey, because we have our weaknesses along the way too. This is not a steep journey like that. It's messy. There's roads, there's turns, there's hills. So we need constant reminders. Motivation is something we need to constantly work on. It's not just born and stays there forever.
Yeah, on this call, I think each one of us has a very unique journey and story. And please feel free to, reach out to any one of us, ask about our story, ask about our journey. We're happy to, provide you with any resources we have, any advice that we have. Create a clear vision. And thank you, Kunal. I just saw your message. Create a clear vision of how to get to where you want. We've all been through this route before, and we're all in transition to reach a goal that really excites us and keeps us very passionate. So I think please reach out. Anybody who's watching this, reach out and feel free to call any one of us or message any one of us. I'll put the link to the three of us, I think, on the social media post, so that you guys can talk to anybody you want.
And I want to reiterate, where I am today is because of mentors and coaches and friends and partners and people who helped me, especially when I was first starting out. I think I've told you guys this story. When I went to buy my very first investment property, my partner that I was working with and our realtor were sitting at the dining room table, and I was doing laps around the table for like 20 minutes. Is this what should I be doing this? This is a lot of money. I don't know if this is the right thing for me. What if I sound like, and they just sat there with this little smile on their face, waiting for me, to peter out and to get all this out of my system. And that was that psychological and the emotional. And I didn't think I didn't know that I could believe this. And that was after weeks of going out for lunch with the guy who became my partner that I was sitting beside at work. And him just planting these seeds in my mind and why can't you have success? Why do you have to stay with this sort of thing? And so it was, having that other person in my life who had already been doing what I wanted to do, right? So he was just a few steps ahead of me, and that made such a difference to me because he could coach me through that stuff. He could answer those questions. He could say, yeah, that's exactly how I felt at that time. And, you know, and that was critical for me of the difference of why so many, you know, why wasn't I just one of those people in the group who continued to go to all the meetings but never pulled the trigger? Because I had that partner, that person supporting me and coaching me and mentoring me and helping me through those steps on that journey. That's what made the biggest difference. And that's why I've become a coach myself, to help other people move through that, because I know what a difference it made for me.
Well, that's all it takes. All it takes is influence. Like you knowing somebody, seeing them go through a journey and deciding, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Anybody who's watching right now, whether you are buying your first property or whether you're buying your first investment, or whether you know somebody who is stuck in, you know, wanting to make a decision like this, but wants to listen to other people's story, we're going to have this video posted on Facebook, edited and finished. It's great for you to share this post with them, get them to see real experiences from the three of us, get them to hear our perspectives on this, and let them know that everybody is in the same place. Most people are in the same place. They just need a little bit of guidance and direction in order to move forward.
You know, maybe we should get people to write into us or send messages to us about their story of the first time that they took action on making a goal or a dream come true. Could be investing in real estate, could be something else. And maybe we can even share some of those stories and just really help other people understand that you're not the only one. All of us have been there before, you know, shaking in our boots about the first time we're going to take action on something and what it was that helped us get over those fears and that resistance in order to actually start to take those steps. So people who are listening to this call, feel free to, you know, send us a message about what it looked like for you when you took action, and then what came of it because of that. What results were you able to achieve that made a difference in you getting the life you always wanted by taking that action? I know I love hearing those stories, so I'd love to hear from everybody.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, that's what building a community is all about.
Totally.
So for everybody who's watching, next week, Saturday, 11 o'clock, we are hosting our 3rd episode, and the title of that episode is When Your Body Wants to Hide, but your brain wants to seek. When your body wants to hide and your brain wants to seek. And it's going to be a fun and exciting. I can't wait to have this conversation myself. Asil was the one who came up with it, and I'm very excited to see what comes out of it. So tune in, stay posted, send us your stories, send us your friend's stories. If there's a good friend that you know that is stuck, send them this video. Let us know what we can change, what we can add, what we can, you know, what we can discuss. All we want is to share information with them. So that's all. As nice as my speaker, the voice quality going bad.
It did again, yeah.
Yeah, but you're fine now. You're fine.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah,
We gotta get you we should have bought you a microphone for your birthday, Omar.
I was waiting for it. Nobody caught on.
Yeah.
So many webinars these days, nobody caught on that I needed a microphone.
It's a good thing I'm cute, because I'm kind of slow.
It's a pleasure. I look forward to taking you on a journey next week as well. And this episode was, as usual, very thought-provoking and special on different levels. And I wouldn't want to spend my brunch any other way. So thank you guys for joining me.
Same here. I'm looking forward to next week. And good thing Seal's leading us, because I have no idea what that means, what that title.
All right, everybody, have a great Saturday, and we'll see you guys next week.